Shalom in Yeshua. I am Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we are doing a study series entitled Yeshua from Genesis to Revelation. This is a part of a discipleship program that Hebraic Heritage Ministries offers. It is a monthly discipleship program where we walk you through the various subjects to help you to learn and understand the Hebraic roots of Christianity. If you are interested in this discipleship program, let us know. You can write to Post Office Box 4111, Abilene, Texas 79608, or send an email to office@hebroots.org. If you're interested in being a monthly supporter of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, or you'd like to send a love offering to the ministry, or you would like for me to speak at your congregation or fellowship group, please let me know and write to Post Office Box 81, Strasburg, Ohio 44680, or send an email to office@hebroots.org. The website of the ministry is www.hebroots.org. Now, this is our sixth and final part of the teaching, Yeshua from Genesis to Revelation. And what we're going to cover in this study is we're going to see the details of how we're going to have the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel in the end of days, and what the book of Revelation has to say about it. We're going to begin by reviewing some of the things we covered at the end of our last segment, and that is the role of the 144,000 to gather the exiles of Israel. In the book of Obadiah, in chapter 1, in verse 21, it says, "And saviors will come on Mount Zion to judge the Mount of Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's." At the time that the kingdom shall be the Lord's, that is the Messiah setting up his Messianic kingdom, that preceding Messiah setting up his Messianic kingdom is saviors will come on Mount Zion. Jewish commentary to this from the Torah Anthology, the Book of the 12 Prophets, Volume 1, page 489, is that these saviors or liberators that come upon Mount Zion are the 10 tribes of Israel. And that in the time of the redemption, or the time of the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel, Messianic times, they will come on Mount Zion. Well, this, I believe, is a reference to the 144,000. And the 144,000 in Revelation chapter 14 and verse 1, they are on Mount Zion. And then in Revelation 14 verse 3, it says, they sing a new song. The uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is a new song. And then it says that these 144,000 were saviors, or they were redeemed from the earth. Well, what we're going to see regarding the 144,000 is on Mount Zion, they're going to be playing their harps. In order to understand what this means, we go to Psalm 137, verses 1 and 2. It says, "By the rivers of Babylon we sat down, we wept when we remembered Zion. By the rivers of Babylon we hanged our harps on the willows." Well, if you hang your harp on the willow, then you can't play it. And notice, while you're in Babylon, while you're in exile, you cannot play your harp. Well, the harp is a musical instrument that's associated with David. And David ruled over all 12 tribes. And when he ruled over all 12 tribes from Jerusalem, it was called Zion. The musical instrument that would symbolize the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is the harp. It's when you return to Zion that you play the harp. Therefore, Revelation chapter 14, verse 1, it says, "And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, with him 144,000. And what are they doing in Revelation chapter 14, verse 2? They are playing harps. Now, the 144,000, their ministry is going to be associated with gathering the 12 tribes of Israel. They are what I call the Moses company. They are leaders in the return of the exiles of Israel to the land of Israel. The exiles of Israel being gathered is likened in the Bible to a harvest. And the festival of harvest happens at the Feast of Tabernacles. Therefore, the task of the 144,000 is going to be thematically linked with the Feast of Tabernacles. When the children of Israel came out of Egypt, they dwelt in booths. And that is a prophetic foreshadowing that in returning from the nations of the world, that the exiles of Israel are going to be tabernacling, or they are going to be dwelling in booths or tents, or they're going to be in assemblies together. That they're going to be coming from all over the world. And if we literally take that one of the 144,000 as a leader of the different groups who are returning to the land of Israel, then when we begin the return of the land, there'll be 144,000 groups of people all over the world who will begin the process to return to the land of Israel once they see the sign to return. And what do we learn in our last segment? What that sign is? That sign is Zion, or the birth of the state of Zion. In Leviticus, in chapter 23, in verse 34, it says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of the 7th month." Now, the 7th month is known as Tishrei, and it is the month where we have Rosh Hashanah, or Yom Teruah, and Yom Kippur, or the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. It is the month of these holidays is the 7th month. And the Feast of Tabernacles begins on the 15th day of the 7th month. So it says you'll have a feast for 7 days. Leviticus in chapter 23 and verse 42, it says, "And you will dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites shall dwell in booths." Why? In Leviticus chapter 23, verse 43, it says, "That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord their God." Well, if the children of Israel coming out of Egypt was just a historical event, why do you have to remember it every year when you celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles? Well, it's because that the Feast of Tabernacles and dwelling in booths is a theme that's associated with gathering the exiles of Israel from the lands where they have been scattered and bringing them back to the land of Israel. Paul understood that the historical Egyptian redemption was a prophetic foreshadowing of the end of days and gathering the exiles of Israel, because he explained in 1 Corinthians in chapter 10, beginning in verse 1, "Moreover, brethren, I would not that you be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and that they all passed through the sea. And they were all baptized or immersed into Moses in the cloud and the sea." What event is this speaking about? It's speaking about the historical Egyptian redemption. So regarding that, Paul goes on to explain in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11, "Now all these things happen unto them for examples," or a type and a shadow, "but they were written for our admonition." He's writing to believers in Yeshua as the Messiah. They were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages are come, or the generation that would see the Messiah gather the exiles of Israel, set his feet down on the Mount of Olives, and set up his kingdom. The task of the 144,000 is thematically linked with the Feast of Tabernacles. Revelation chapter 7 tells us about the 144,000. They are 12,000 from the various tribes of Israel. And then it says about them in Revelation chapter 7 verse 9, "After this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues." This terminology is associated with the Feast of Tabernacles, because the Feast of Tabernacles is known as the Feast of all nations. And these people are from all nations. During the Feast of Tabernacles, during the 7 days in the temple, there were a total of 70 bullocks that were sacrificed during this time. And the 70 bullocks represent the 70 nations going back to the establishment of the nations of the world in the book of Genesis. During the Messianic Era, once Messiah sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives, all the nations will be required to come to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. Zechariah chapter 14 verse 16 says, "It will come to pass that everyone that is left of the nations that came against Jerusalem, or that divided the land of Israel during the tribulation, will go up from year by year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles." Looking at Revelation chapter 7 verse 9, not only do we have this great multitude, but we are told that they have palms in their hands. It is during the Feast of Tabernacles that you have palms in your hands, because we have in Leviticus chapter 23 and verse 40, it says, "You will take of the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles branches of palm trees, and you are supposed to wave them." Then we have in Revelation chapter 7 verse 10 that they cried with a loud voice, "Salvation to our God." In the first century in the temple, there was a ceremony that took place on Hoshana Rabbah, which is the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And what happened in the temple is they went around the altar either 3 or 7 times, and when they went around the altar, they would say the words, "Hosanna, save now, Hosanna, save now," or "Salvation to our God." So we can see in describing the 144,000 in Revelation chapter 7 that those who they are leading, that in describing them, they are thematically linked with the Feast of Tabernacles, because the return of the exiles of Israel to the land of Israel will be in various groups of people all around the world, and they will be living and dwelling together outside, and it's likened to the children of Israel dwelling in tents or dwelling in booths. Continuing on and understanding that it is during the last 3.5 years when we have the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel and the return to the land. In Revelation chapter 7 verse 13, there's a question that gets asked, "Who are these which are arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from?" And the answer is, in Revelation chapter 7, verse 14, "These are they that came out of great tribulation." The great tribulation is the 3.5 years that precede Messiah setting his feet down on the Mount of Olives. Then, in describing those that came out of great tribulation, this is what's said about them. In Revelation chapter 7, verses 16 and 17, it says they will hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light upon them, nor any heat. That is a quote from Isaiah chapter 49 and verse 10. So who are these that came out of great tribulation? The answer is Isaiah in chapter 49 and verse 10. Revelation 7 verse 17 goes on to say, and the Lamb will lead them into living fountains of water. And then it says, he will wipe away all tears from their eyes. Well, why do they have tears? Because exile is associated as a time of mourning. It's a time of tears. Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 15, Rachel is weeping for her children, and she's only told to quit weeping when she's told in Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 17 that her children will return to their own border. So the end of the exile of the house of Jacob is when you can wipe away the tears from your eyes. Now let's see how the answer that is given to the question, who are these that came out of great tribulation? That the answer is a quote or a reference to Isaiah chapter 49 verse 10. Isaiah 49 verse 10 says, they will hunger no more, nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them. For he that has mercy on them, which Revelation 7 verse 17 says, it is the Lamb, it is the Messiah, that he will lead them even by springs of water. Let's go back to Isaiah 49 and let's see the context of Isaiah in chapter 49. In verse 6, it says that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob. That is the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel. Then it goes on to say that you may say to the prisoners, go forth. Who are the prisoners? They are the exiles of Israel. And what are they doing when they go forth? It is ending their exile. So the subject of Isaiah 49:6 is uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, and then Isaiah 49:9 saying to the prisoners to go forth. These are those who is described in Isaiah 49 verse 10, that is them, the prisoners that are going forth, that will not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them, for he that has mercy on them will lead them, even by springs of water shall he guide them. So the ones who come out of great tribulation are the exiles of Israel. And who is leading them out is the 144,000. In the book, A Matter of Return by Rabbi Raphael Eisenberg on page 132, quoting from the Midrash of Isaiah in chapter 49, Midrash Rabbah, that the prisoners designates the exiles of Israel. Now remember this principle, that it will happen according to how it did happen. The uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel in the future is likened to how the children of Israel came out of Egypt. Let's review a couple of the verses that we looked at regarding this. Hosea chapter 2 and verse 15, it says, I will give her her vineyards from there, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope. Achor in Hebrew means trouble or troubling. So the valley of Achor, the valley of trouble, the valley of trouble, the valley of trouble. It is a reference to the tribulation period. The valley of trouble is a door of hope. Why is the tribulation period a time of hope? Because that is when the exile of the 12 tribes is going to end, and she will sing there, as in the days of her youth, as in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. In Revelation chapter 14 in verse 2, we see the 144,000. They are singing a new song as they're playing their harps. They're playing their harps in Revelation 14 in verse 2, and they're singing the new song in Revelation chapter 14 in verse 3. Micah chapter 7 verse 15 says, according to the days of your coming out of the land of Egypt, according to those days will I in the future show unto you marvelous things. Well, when the children of Israel historically were led out of Egypt, it was Moses that was their leader, but the one that directed them in their journeys was the cloudy pillar. It says in Exodus chapter 13, verse 20, that they took their journey from Sukkot. The Feast of Tabernacles in Hebrew is called Sukkot. It was the season of Passover, but they took their journey from Sukkot. In Exodus chapter 13, verse 21, it says, "And the Lord went before them." This is going to be the Messiah. As we're told in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, the rock that was with the children of Israel in the wilderness, the rock is the Messiah. Well, the Messiah was not only the rock, but the Messiah is the cloudy pillar. Because the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud, the cloudy pillar, to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire, to give them light, to go by day and night. The presence of the cloudy pillar is called the glory of the Lord. Exodus chapter 40, verse 34, "Then the cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." I want you to notice that the children of Israel were led by the cloudy pillar with the direction, the leadership of Moses. That is a prophecy that in the future that the cloudy pillar will once again lead the exiles of Israel to the land during the last 3.5 years, being directed and led by the 144,000. In Isaiah, in chapter 4, in verse 5, it is written, "And the Lord will create," will is future, "upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion." Mount Zion isn't just one place. It is a term that describes the people of the God of Israel congregated to return to the land of Israel. Because there's multiple dwelling places of Zion. And upon her assemblies, plural. Therefore, when you begin your journey to return to the land of Israel, living in exile in the nations of the world, when you gather together with your assembly of people, that assembly the Bible calls Mount Zion. And the cloudy pillar is going to lead you once you make that assembling, and you're going to have a leader of your camp, the 144,000. So it says in Isaiah chapter 4, verse 5, "The Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion and upon her assemblies a cloud and a smoke by day, and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For upon all the glory shall be a defense." Therefore, your protection is being in that camp. When the children of Israel came out of Egypt, as long as they were in the camp, they were protected. But when they got outside of the camp, that's when they didn't have protection in the wilderness. If you are in this camp of the righteous during this 3.5-year period, the cloudy pillar is going to feed you, clothe you, protect you from the elements, and to protect you from your enemies. That is the beast system. And it says in Isaiah chapter 4, verse 6, "And there will be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert from storm and from rain." Yeshua is glorified through the ingathering of the exiles. In Isaiah chapter 35 and verse 2, it says, "You will see the glory of the Lord and the excellency of our God." The glory of the Lord is the cloudy pillar. And so those in the earth will see the glory of the Lord. And in seeing the glory of the Lord, Isaiah 35 verse 10, "The ransom of the Lord will return and come to Zion." That is the return of the exiles of Israel to the land. The last 3.5 years being led by the cloudy pillar. And the people in the earth are seeing the glory of the Lord. With the defeat of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, it says in Ezekiel 39 verse 21, "And I will set my glory among the heathen." And what is setting his glory among the heathen? Ezekiel 39 verse 25, "Now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob." And bringing again the captivity of Jacob, he is setting his glory among the heathen. In Psalm 102 verse 16, it says, "When the Lord builds up Zion, he will appear in his glory." When he unites the 12 tribes of Israel, he's appearing in his glory. His glory is the cloudy pillar. In Revelation chapter 21 verse 23, we can see that the glory of the Lord is the Messiah, who is the light of the New Jerusalem. Revelation 21:23. "And the city, that is the New Jerusalem, had no need of the sun, neither the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it." The glory lit it, and the Lamb is the light. Who is the glory of the Lord that led the children of Israel in the wilderness through the cloudy pillar? It is the Messiah. Who will be the cloudy pillar that will lead the children of Israel when the people on the earth see the glory of the Lord? It is going to be the Messiah. The Messiah led the children of Israel out of Egypt. Historically, in the Torah, Messiah will lead the exiles of Israel to the land during the last 3.5 years of the tribulation period before he sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives. Let's continue to look at this pattern, that how it did happen when the children of Israel came out of Egypt is how it will happen in the end of days with the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel during tribulation times. Historically, Pharaoh didn't acknowledge the God of Israel. In Exodus chapter 5 verse 1 it is written, "And afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go.' But Pharaoh replies in Exodus chapter 5 verse 2 and said, 'I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go.'" Redemption is revealing to the people of the God of Israel and to the world who the God of Israel is. Exodus chapter 14 and verse 4, it says, "And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord." Exodus chapter 14 verse 18, "And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." In Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 1, it says, "Son of man, prophesy against Gog." Ezekiel 39 verse 6, it says, "I will send a fire on Magog." Why? That they may know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel 39 and verse 7, "So will I make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel." And it goes on to say, "And the heathen will know that I am the Lord." You see, historically, Egypt is going to know who is the God of Israel. But at the same time, the people of the God of Israel are knowing who their Redeemer is. In Exodus, in chapter 3 and verse 13, Moses said to God, "Behold, when I come to the children of Israel and say, the God of your fathers has sent me unto you, and they will say to me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them?" And God said to Moses, "I am that I am." And he said, "You shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me unto you." Verse 15, God moreover said unto Moses, "You will say unto the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations." So the children of Israel wanted to know who is the one that is redeeming us. And in delivering the children of Israel, it was so that Pharaoh in Egypt will know that I am the Lord. This is a prophecy of the future, that in the gathering of the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel will have the revelation of who the Messiah is that is redeeming them, as well as the heathen in the world knowing who the Messiah of Israel is. Now we can understand Yeshua's prayer in John chapter 17, verse 21, when he prayed that they all may be one. Who is he praying that would be one? He's praying for the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel. And what is linked with this thought of uniting the 12 tribes of Israel? It is that the world would believe that you have sent me. In John 17, verse 23, that the world will know that you've sent me. The world will know that Yeshua is the Messiah when his people are one, when he unites the 12 tribes of Israel. So the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel and the end of the exile of the house of Jacob is associated with all nations knowing the God of Israel and the Messiah of Israel, and it's Israel knowing the Messiah of Israel. When the 12 tribes of Israel are gathered, which is likened to them being resurrected from the dead, in Ezekiel in chapter 37 and verse 11 it says, "These bones are the whole house of Israel." Then it goes on to say in Ezekiel in chapter 37 and verse 12, "Prophesy and say unto them, Thus says the Lord God, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves, and I will bring you into the land of Israel." That exile is associated with being dead and being in your graves, the dry bones of Ezekiel chapter 37. But I'm going to cause you to come up out of your graves. That's resurrection. And I will bring you into the land of Israel. When I bring you into the land of Israel, Ezekiel 37 verse 13, you will know that I am the Lord. You will know the Messiah. Now, when Yeshua was resurrected at his first coming, he was then raised to glory with his resurrection. Well, Yeshua and the house of Jacob are one. Therefore, when the house of Jacob is united, which is likened to them being resurrected from the dead, then Israel united will be glorified. How are they glorified? They are the head of all nations when Messiah sets up his kingdom. So Yeshua prayed in John chapter 17 verse 22, "And the glory which you gave me, I have given them." Redemption is the sanctification of the name of the God of Israel. In the book, The Messianic Idea in Israel by Joseph Klausner, on page 238, he writes, "The redemption itself is but an act of mercy or compassion which the Lord does for his people for the purpose of sanctifying his name." Let's see how when the 12 tribes of Israel are united, it's associated with sanctifying the name of the God of Israel, or sanctifying the name of Yeshua, the Messiah. In Ezekiel in chapter 38, verse 18, it is written, "And it will come to pass at the same time when Gog will come up against the land of Israel," verse 22, "I will plead against him with pestilence and with blood." That is associated with the judgments that came upon Egypt, "and with great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. And as a result," Ezekiel chapter 38 and verse 23, "I will magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and you will know that I am the Lord." Historically, the God of Israel delivered his people with signs and wonders. In Exodus in chapter 3 and verse 20, it is written, "And I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with all my wonders." And then in Exodus, in chapter 7, in verse 3, it is written, "And I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt." In Exodus, in chapter 11 and verse 9, it is written, "The Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt." In the Jewish commentary, the Torah Anthology, the Book of the 12 Prophets, Volume 2, page 387, they explain that the future redemption, that is, the uniting the 12 tribes of Israel, will be one great marvel. It will be marvelous even in the eyes of God, who does wondrous or marvelous things. Psalm 72 in verse 18. "For then the marvels will surpass all the marvelous things that occurred until then, both known and unknown." In the book Anticipating the Redemption by Rebbe Menachem Schneerson, Volume 2, page 21, he explains that the signs and the wonders that are associated with the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel will be great, even with compared to the signs and wonders that were done when the children of Israel came out of Egypt. The future redemption will resemble those which accompanied the redemption from Egypt. There will be a distinct advantage to the miracles of the future redemption, to the extent that these miracles will be considered wondrous when even compared to the miracles of the Exodus. The uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is associated with the theme of the God of Israel making a distinction between those who serve him and those who do not. Historically, in Egypt, the God of Israel made a distinction between his people who dwelt in Goshen and the rest of the land of Egypt. In Exodus, in chapter 8 and verse 22, it is written, "And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarms of flies shall be there, to the end that you may know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth." Exodus chapter 9, verse 4, "And the Lord will sever between the cattle of Egypt and the cattle of Israel, and there shall nothing die at all that is the children of Israel." Exodus chapter 9 and verse 6, "And the Lord did that thing on the morrow, and all the cattle of Egypt died, but the cattle of the children of Israel died not one." We can see this theme if we continue on in Exodus. In chapter 10 and verse 23, "They sought not one another, neither rose any from his place for 3 days, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings." Exodus chapter 11, verse 6, "And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. But against the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue against man or beast, that you may know how the Lord puts a difference between the Egyptians and Israel." Speaking about the future redemption, the ingathering of the 12 tribes of Israel, in that time frame, it is prophesied in Malachi in chapter 3 and verse 17, "And they shall be mine, says the Lord, in that day when I make up my jewels. And I will spare them as a man spares his own son that serves him. And you will return, and you will discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serves God and him that serves him not." What we have covered so far in this session is we've explained that the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel is an event that's associated with the last 3.5 years. And it is the role of the 144,000 to be leaders of the camps of people all over the world who are returning to the land of Israel. And these different camps all around the world are going to be led by the Messiah, the cloudy pillar, also known as the glory of God. And in doing so, there will be miracles that will be performed on behalf of the exiles of Israel who are returning home. And those miracles will be so great that they'll be greater than the miracles that happened in Egypt when Pharaoh and all the land of Israel was being judged. And the whole world will see the glory of God when he gathers his people back to the land. And through these things, the nation of Israel will know who the Lord is. They will know that Yeshua is the Messiah. And all the people on the earth will know that Yeshua is the Messiah of Israel as well. The next thing that we're going to cover is, what are the places in the land that the exiles of Israel will return to? Well, we're going to go over several places, and they are as follows. Number 1, the return is to Jerusalem. Number 2, the return is to Judea and Samaria, or the mountains of Israel. Number 3, the return is to Bashan and Gilead, which is western Jordan that extends to southern Syria. Number 4, the return is to Lebanon. Number 5, the return is the southern desert of Israel, known as the Negev. And number 6, the return is to the land area of Edom, Moab, and Ammon. But if we are close to the tribulation period and the dividing of the land of Israel and the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel, Messiah being glorified, you may be thinking to yourself a very valid question at this point in time. How are the lands of Bashan and Gilead and Lebanon and Edom and Moab and Ammon going to be opened up to the exiles of Israel for them to return to the land? That's what we're going to cover in the next part of this teaching. And the answer is, it's going to be from the defeat of Gog and Magog on the mountains of Israel that the Arabs and the Palestinians who are living around the mountains of Israel, they are going to realize that Allah is not fighting for them. They're going to realize who the God of Israel is. And this is because to the Arab world, this is a religious war. It is to show the world that their God, Allah, is supreme. And so the God of Israel is going to challenge this thought. And he's going to make a mockery of Allah. And he is going to defeat the aspirations of the Arab world as it relates to establishing a Palestinian state, to do away with the nation of Israel and to cast them into the sea. He is going to come between those plans, and in the process, he's going to show that he made a covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he's going to defeat the Gog-Magog coalition upon the mountains of Israel, and in doing so, the heart of the Arab peoples will be turned to the God of Israel, and they will become friendly in welcoming the exiles of Israel to those lands. This is what we're going to understand next in the teaching. There is a fleeing from exile to Jerusalem. Jeremiah chapter 50 and verse 16, it is written, "For fear of the oppressing sword that comes upon Babylon, they will turn every one to his people, and they shall flee every one to his own land." And then it says in Jeremiah chapter 51 and verse 50, "You who have escaped the sword, go away, stand not still, remember the Lord afar off, and let Jerusalem come to your mind." So there's a fleeing to Jerusalem. Next, there's a fleeing to the mountains of Israel. This is Ezekiel in chapter 37 and verse 22, which says, I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel. The one nation is the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel, and a place of the unification is upon the mountains of Israel. The mountains of Israel are the mountains of Judea and Samaria, which extends into Jerusalem. And this is where the God of Israel is going to unite the exiles of Israel. From Micah in chapter 7 and verse 14, it says, let them feed on Bashan and Gilead as in the days of old, or as in the days when the children of Israel came out of Egypt. Bashan in Gilead is western Jordan and extends up into southern Syria. Zechariah in chapter 10 and verse 10 tells us that there will be a return to Lebanon. As it is written, I will bring them again also out of the land of Egypt and gather them out of Assyria. This is a reference to the nations of the world. I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon, and place shall not be found for them. Obadiah in chapter 1 and verse 20, this is a specific prophecy to those who are of Sephardic origin and background. It says, in the captivity the host of the children of Israel shall possess that of the Canaanites, even Zarephath, in the captivity of Jerusalem, which is Sepharad, which is Spain, or the Sephardics, and they shall possess the cities of the south, or the southern desert of Israel, the Negev. And then finally, Daniel in chapter 11 and verse 41, it says, he will enter into the glorious land, and many countries will be overthrown, but these will escape out of his hand, even Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. So this is western Jordan that extends down into the Red Sea. Now remember, there's a prophecy in Isaiah chapter 28 and verse 15 that the leaders of Israel will be making a covenant with death. I believe this is a reference to a covenant or an agreement to establish a Palestinian state. When this happens, there will be a rebellion in the land of Israel by those who are opposing the creation, the establishment of a Palestinian state. But in order for the nations of the world to enforce the Palestinian state, they're going to want to remove Jews out of their homes, Jews who are living in the mountains of Israel or the West Bank. And this is one of the issues of the day of the Lord, or the tribulation period, because speaking about the day of the Lord in Joel chapter 1 verse 15 and Joel chapter 2 verses 1 and 2, it says that in the day of the Lord, Joel chapter 3 and verse 6, that the children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold to the Grecians, that you might remove them far from their border. The children of Judah and Jerusalem are being removed from their borders during the day of the Lord, and they're being sold by the Grecians. This is a reference that the nations of the world want to establish a democratic Palestinian state, and democracy is a Greek concept. In Jeremiah chapter 30 and verse 17, we're told that in the season or the time when Jews are being kicked out of their homes in the land of Israel, that is a sign or a signal that the God of Israel is going to end the captivity of his people from the nations of the world where they've been scattered and bring them to the land of Israel. Jeremiah, in chapter 30, verse 17, it is written, for I will restore health unto you, health is a reference to the end of the exile of Jacob. And I will heal you of your wound. The wound is the exile. Why? Because they called you an outcast, saying, this is Zion, which no man seeks after. Well, if we look at this verse in the Hebrew, where we have the phrase, they called, it is the Strong's number 7121. It's the Hebrew word kara. And the Hebrew word kara means to approach and to speak to someone in a challenging or an aggressive way. We have a slang expression in the United States of, you're in my face, get out of my face. You challenge someone in an aggressive way, you get in their face. This is the meaning of the Hebrew word kara. And then it says, because they called you an outcast. The word outcast is the Strong's number 5080. It's the Hebrew word nadak, which means to drive out or expel. So whenever they challenge and speak to you in an aggressive way to drive you out or expel you, that is when I'm going to heal you of your wound. The ultimate challenge to drive them out is the Gog-Magog invasion, who come upon the mountains of Israel. The Gog-Magog war is a war that the prophets prophesied about long ago. And it's such an important event that it changes the course of world history. That is natural human history, through the divine intervention of the God of Israel for him to save his people from the Gog-Magog armies. And in the prayer book, the Siddur, there is a reading during the Feast of Tabernacles. And this reading during the Feast of Tabernacles from the Haftorah is the reading from Ezekiel 38 and Ezekiel in chapter 39. Well, it's important for us to understand in Ezekiel 38 and 39 where the Gog-Magog coalition of forces, where they attack. They don't attack the whole land of Israel. They attack specifically the mountains of Israel, which is Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. It is an invasion upon the mountains of Israel, Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem. It says in Ezekiel 38:2, Son of man, set your face against Gog and prophesy against him. And it says in Ezekiel 38:8 that he comes against the mountains of Israel. Then in Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 2, he comes against the mountains of Israel. And what the God of Israel does in Ezekiel chapter 38:22 in defeating Gog, partially what he does is he pleads with him with pestilence, with blood, with great hailstones, fire, and brimstone. In the Midrash Rabbah, which is a Jewish commentary on the Scriptures, volume 3, page 144, there is a commentary regarding this fact, and it says, Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause to rain a very grievous hail. And this is referring to Exodus in chapter 9 and verse 18. It is speaking about what the children of Israel in the time of the redemption from Egypt. It's speaking about a plague that comes upon Egypt. And it says, the commentary says, such has not been in all the land of Egypt, which is what it says in the verse. And the rabbinical commentary is, but such has not been, that is, had not been in the past, but there will be in the time to come. When? In the days of Gog and Magog, as it is written, Ezekiel 38:22, an overflowing shower and great hailstone, fire and brimstone. Gog and his armies then are defeated. And regarding his defeat in Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 21, it says, I will set my glory among the heathen. And then it says, Ezekiel 39:22, so the house of Israel will know that I am the Lord their God from that day forward. It is the revelation of Yeshua the Messiah to his people. And not only will the house of Israel know the Lord their God from that day forward, but it goes on to say that the nations of the world will as well. Ezekiel 39:23, and the heathen will know that the house of Israel went into captivity for their iniquity because they trespassed against me. Therefore hid I my face from them and gave them into the hand of their enemies. So fell they all by the sword. With the defeat of Gog and Magog, the God of Israel declares the end of the exile. Ezekiel 39:25, now will I bring again the captivity of Jacob and have mercy upon the whole house of Israel. And the way that he's going to gather them, Ezekiel 39:29, is, I'm going to pour out my spirit upon the house of Israel, says the Lord God. Historically, it was after the 10 plagues that came upon the children of Israel did they get to leave Egypt. We can see this in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 29, as it is written. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. Midnight is a prophetic allusion to the period of the tribulation in the end of days. Exodus chapter 12, verse 30. And Pharaoh rose up, Exodus chapter 12, verse 31, and he called for Moses and Aaron by night. And he said, get you forth and go and serve the Lord as you have said. When Babylon falls, which is a judgment upon the nations, which is plague upon the nations, it is then that Zion is redeemed, or the children of Israel and Judah come out of Babylon and return to the land of Israel. Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 1, the word of the Lord that came against Babylon. In Jeremiah 50, verse 3, making your land desolate. So we're talking about the judgment that comes upon Babylon. And once we have that judgment, then Jeremiah 50, verses 4 and 5, the children of Israel come, they and the children of Judah together, which means all 12 tribes will be living in a place codenamed Babylon at the time of the tribulation and the ingathering of the 12 tribes of Israel. And they will ask the way to Zion. We can see this association in Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 49, which says, as Babylon has caused the slain of the Israel to fall, so at Babylon shall fall the slain of all the earth. And then it says in Jeremiah 51, verse 50, you have escaped the sword that comes upon Babylon, who are living in Babylon. Go away, stand not still, remember the Lord afar off, and let Jerusalem come to your mind. Historically, when the children of Israel came out of Egypt and Pharaoh and his army was drowned in the Red Sea, in Exodus chapter 15, verse 1, they sang the song of Moses. Exodus in chapter 15 and verse 1 says, then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord, saying, I will sing. They sang, I will sing, indicating that what they're singing will be sung again in future generations. And we see this in the end of days in Revelation 15, verse 3. They sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and they sing the song of the Lamb. Now, it says in Zechariah in chapter 14 and verse 3, after the nations come to divide the city of Jerusalem, Zechariah chapter 14 and verse 2, it says that the Lord will go forth and he will fight against the nations as when he fought in the day of battle. He will fight against the nations as he did fight in the day of battle. When was the day of battle? It was when Pharaoh and his army drowned in the Red Sea. Therefore, because he will fight like he did fight, that the defeat of Pharaoh and his army in the Red Sea is a prophetic foreshadowing of what will happen in the end of days when he fights against the nations, specifically when he fights against Gog and Magog and defeats them. So let's examine now Exodus chapter 15 and see how it's a prophetic foreshadowing of the judgment of the nations and the redemption of the exiles of Israel during the tribulation. In Exodus in chapter 15 and verse 11, they say, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders?" This is thematically linked to what the 12 tribes are saying in their redemption in Revelation in chapter 15, verse 3, when they sing the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb, they say, "Great and marvelous are your works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are your ways, thou King of saints." They're making a reference or an allusion back to Exodus in chapter 15, verse 11, which is the song that the children of Israel sung when Pharaoh and his army drowned in the Red Sea. Well, if you look at this verse in the Hebrew, in the first few words of this verse in the Hebrew, it will make an acronym that if you spell out and pronounce the acronym is Maccabee, alluding to the Maccabees who rebelled against Antiochus Epiphanes IV and the Greeks, who tried to impose their ways in the land of Israel. That is a prophecy of the end of days, that when the nations of the world tried to impose their ways in the land by insisting on the creation of a Palestinian state, that there would be a rebellion. And that rebellion in the land of Israel by religious Jews who do not want to see the establishment of a Palestinian state and don't want to see themselves being kicked out of their homes, that their rebellion is likened to that Maccabee rebellion, and their victory in the rebellion is associated with the joy that the children of Israel felt when Pharaoh and their army drowned in the Red Sea. So we have encoded in the song that the children of Israel sang at the Red Sea in Exodus 15:11, we have encoded in the Hebrew the word Maccabee. And then if you see that Exodus 15:11 is a prophetic foreshadowing of the rebellion in the end of days against the Palestinian state as an event that sets in motion the following, and that is with then the nations of the world wanting to come and remove Jews out of their homes, that is the war of Gog and Magog, that with the defeat of the Gog-Magog coalition, that breaks the pride in the heart of the Arabs, and their eyes are opened and they see who the true God of the universe is. It is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is the God of Israel. Their hearts are changed, and the Arabs then become friendly, and they will welcome the exiles of Israel to return to the land of Israel in those areas that we went over previously. So the sequence is you have the creation of a Palestinian state, a rebellion in the land of Israel against that Palestinian state. Then we have the nations of the world trying to enforce the agreement to establish a Palestinian state, kicking Jews out of their homes. That's Gog-Magog. And the Gog-Magog coalition is defeated, and that sets up an opportunity for the exiles of Israel to return, because at the end of Ezekiel 39:25, the God of Israel, with the defeat of Gog and Magog declares the exile over. Once the exiles of Israel return back to the land during those last 3.5 years, as we're told in Revelation chapter 12, then Messiah sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives, Zechariah 14 verse 4, and sets up his kingdom. Let's see that order of events here prophetically foreshadowed in Exodus in chapter 15. In verse 11, we have the allusion to the rebellion. And then we have Exodus 15, and verse 14 is a reference to breaking the pride of the Arab heart, which comes about through the Gog-Magog defeat. And it says, the people will hear and be afraid. Sorrow will take hold on the inhabitants of Philistia. That's a reference, I believe, to the Palestinians and those who are living in the Gaza area. Then the dukes of Edom will be amazed, and the mighty men of Moab trembling. And it says, and all the inhabitants of Canaan shall melt away. This is the defeat of the pride in the Arab heart. And then it says in Exodus in chapter 15 and verse 16, fear and dread shall fall upon them till the people pass over. You see, once sorrow takes hold on the inhabitants of Philistia and the inhabitants of Canaan melt away, then fear and dread fall upon them till the people of the God of Israel pass over. And then it says in Exodus 15 verse 17, he will bring them in and he will plant them in the mountain of his inheritance. And once he brings them in and plants them in, then, Exodus 15:18, the Lord will reign forever and ever. Let us see in Isaiah in chapter 16 where Moab is protecting and hiding the exiles of Israel from the beast and the beast system. Isaiah 16 verse 1, send ye the lamb to the ruler of the land, from Selah to the wilderness, unto the mount of the daughter of Zion. It says, so the daughters of Moab shall be at the fords of Arnon. Verse 4, let my outcasts dwell with you, Moab. The outcasts are the exiles of Israel who are returning to the land. Be a covert to them from the face of the spoiler, for the extortioner is at an end, the spoiler ceases, the oppressors are consumed out of the land. And what is the timing when this is happening? It is Isaiah 16 verse 5, and in mercy shall your throne be established. When Messiah is going to set his feet down on the Mount of Olives and set up his kingdom, in that season, prior to him doing that the outcasts of Israel are going to dwell with Moab. Why is Moab receiving them? Because the pride of their heart was broken with the defeat of Gog and Magog and that coalition. And so the God of Israel brings his people in, and then his throne gets established. Exodus 15 verse 18, the Lord will reign forever and ever. And we can see an outline of this. Zechariah chapter 14 verse 2, the nations divide Jerusalem. Verse 3, he fights against the nations as he fought in the day of battle. Verse 4, his feet stands upon the Mount of Olives. And then Zechariah 14 verse 9, the Lord will be king over all the earth, and that day there will be one Lord and his name one. The one who's ruling and reigning, being king over all the earth, is the Messiah of Israel. It is Yeshua the Messiah. One Israel is the tribes of Israel united. In the Art Scroll of Genesis, volume 2, in page 1909, quoting from 1 Chronicles chapter 17, verse 21, it says, your nation Israel, a unique, or in Hebrew the word is ahad, one people. The commentary goes on to say that the Hebrew word ahad describes the unification of the 12 tribes of Israel. Because the last two letters of Ahad in Hebrew spell 12, and the first letter of Ahad, which is the Aleph, is 1 in Hebrew, and this refers to the unity of the 12. And it is a unified Israel that bears God's glory, or, as we would understand it, brings glory to the Messiah of Israel. In Jeremiah, in chapter 31, verse 6, it is prophesied that there will be a day that the watchman upon Mount Ephraim will cry, "Arise, and let us go up to Zion." By watching and listening to the teaching in this series, Yeshua from Genesis to Revelation, we have explained in the last part of this series the role of the Messiah to unite the 12 tribes of Israel, and how it's going to be taking place in the end of days. And the events that are going on in the world around us signal that the time is near for these prophecies to be fulfilled, for there to be the end of the exile of the house of Jacob, and the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel, and Messiah to be glorified. And it says that there will be a day that the watchman will cry, "Arise, and let us go up to Zion." I'd like to submit to you that the message that you have heard is a watchman message. And what we are declaring and sharing with you, it is time for you to arise, to awaken out of your spiritual slumber, and to go to Zion. In the book, Ephraim, the Gentile Children of Israel, by Yair Davidi, on page 224, he explains that in Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 6, the word watchman, if you render it into the Hebrew, is associated with the word Christian. The word watchman is natzar. In the way you say Christian, Hebrew is notzrim. It contains the same Hebrew root letters. And the rabbinical commentary states that this verse is referring to those who would regard themselves and see themselves as being Christians. That the prophecy said that those who are believers in Yeshua as the Messiah would be proclaiming the prophetic message, "Arise and let us go to Zion." Indeed, this is the message that you have heard in this teaching. In the book, The Messiah Text, by Raphael Patai, on page 144, it is explained that it is the role of Elijah in the ministry of Elijah to announce the redemption of the world, that is the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel, to the nation of Israel. And the message that you have just heard is also a message of the ministry of the spirit of Elijah. And the message of the ministry of the spirit of Elijah is in Malachi in chapter 4 and verse 4, to remember the Torah of Moses, to return to the Torah, to return to the God of Israel, that is the Messiah of Israel, that is Yeshua the Messiah, and to prepare for him to unite and to gather the 12 tribes of Israel. You have heard a message in this series, and we have now gone over seeing Yeshua from Genesis to Revelation. We saw him in the Torah, and we saw by understanding who Yeshua is in the Torah, that is necessary and needful to understand why he died on the tree and what his earthly ministry at his first coming was all about. It was centered in his role to unite and gather the exiles of Israel. Acts chapter 1, we're told that the purpose of the outpouring of the Holy Spirit is so that we would be sent out in the nations of the world, proclaiming the message of Yeshua, repentance of sin, returning the Torah, in his role to unite the 12 tribes of Israel. Paul's ministry was to the exiles of Israel. Peter wrote a letter to the exiles of Israel. So we see how the writings of the epistles is associated with this function and this task. And then the book of Revelation gives us the details of actually how it's going to come to pass, along with the prophets of Israel, in the events that are going on in the world at the time that we have the ingathering of the 12 tribes of Israel by the Messiah of Israel. Now, we'd like to remind you that if you've enjoyed this teaching, that Hebraic Heritage Ministries offers you a monthly discipleship program where you can be trained on understanding the Hebraic roots of Christianity. If you're interested in these studies, please write to Post Office Box 4111, Abilene, Texas 79608, or send an email to office@hebroots.org. If you'd like to become a monthly supporter of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, or if you would like to send a love offering to the ministry, or contact me regarding having me come and speak to your congregation or fellowship group, please let me know. You can write to Post Office Box 81, Strasburg, Ohio 44680, or send an email to office@hebroots.org. The website of Hebraic Heritage Ministries is www.hebroots.org. Remember always these words from 1 John in chapter 2 and verse 6, which says, "He who says he abides in him, he who says that he's a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah, ought to walk," that is, to live our lives, "even as he walked." And how did he walk? He followed the Torah, even as he instructed us, "If you love me, keep my commandments." We, if we love Yeshua, are to follow his Torah and to have it written upon our hearts. Remember always, and also from Psalm 122 and verse 6, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They will prosper that love thee." What is praying for the peace of Jerusalem? Praying for the peace of Jerusalem is praying for the coming of King Messiah. It is a prayer for the uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel. It is a prayer for the Messianic era. And ultimately, it is a prayer for the new heavens and the new earth and for the new Jerusalem. I pray that this teaching on Yeshua from Genesis to Revelation has been a rich blessing to you, and it has allowed you to draw closer to Yeshua the Messiah, so that you can bear fruit for him and his kingdom. Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.